Let's start with something simple. You wake up early, step outside into the soft light of dawn, and take a walk. Just an ordinary walk, on a dusty road lined with worn stones, grass poking through the cracks. But what if that road was 2,000 years old? What if you were walking on the very stones laid down by Roman engineers before the first medieval castle was ever built, before paper money, before coffee, just stone, gravel, and the long, quiet hum of history beneath your feet? Roman roads are one of those things people kind of know about, but don't always stop to appreciate. They think, oh yeah, straight roads, stone roads. The Romans were good at building stuff. And that's true. But the story is deeper, grittier, and stranger than it first appears. Because the roads weren't just about moving armies or trade. They were about control, about order, about stitching together the world, one footstep at a time. So, where did it all begin? Well, before Rome was an empire, before generals marched in triumph, and before Caesar ever picked up a pen, there was a muddy trail, and someone needed to get from point A to point B. Not to conquer, not to build, just to get home before nightfall. The earliest Roman roads weren't grand at all. They were probably worn footpaths through fields and forests, marked by stones and trees. But Rome had something other towns didn't, a strange little obsession with order. Even in its early days, maybe 500 BCE or so, Roman leaders were already thinking about structure. Not just how to get around, but how to build something that would last. Something that could be repaired, patrolled, taxed, protected, a system. And so, sometime around 312 BCE, they got serious. A man named Appius Claudius, a Roman censor, commissioned a new kind of road. It would run south from Rome all the way to Capua, and it would be straight, hard, efficient, a spine of stone cutting through the hills and valleys of Italy. They called it the Via Appia, the Appian Way, and it was the beginning of something much, much bigger. What made Roman roads so different? First, they were built like sandwiches. No, really, layers. On the bottom, you had a deep trench filled with rocks. Above that, smaller stones, then gravel, then paving stones fitted like puzzle pieces, sometimes flat, sometimes convex, to let the rain run off to the sides, and all of it slightly raised, like a sleeping spine, quietly stretching across the land. But here's the weird thing. The Romans didn't build roads for convenience. They built them for war. Most of the early roads were military highways, designed so that legions could march, fast, disciplined, unstoppable. It was less about commerce and more about crushing rebellions before they got messy. But that's the thing with roads. Once you build them, people start to use them. For wagons, for oxen, for letters, for ideas. And suddenly, you've got something new, a network. Imagine it. Dusty traders carrying olive oil, scribes bringing news, soldiers marching with bronze-tipped sandals, prisoners, pilgrims, poets, all walking the same stones, all heading towards something, or away from it. That's what made Roman roads different. They weren't just paths, they were connectors. They turned a patchwork of tribes and cities into a single heartbeat. One empire, one road, endless direction. And so begins our journey. We'll travel down the Appian Way and beyond, through mountains, across rivers, into towns forgotten by time. We'll follow the stones as they spread from Rome to the edge of the world. Because Roman roads weren't just a thing the empire built. They were the thing that built the empire. And we're only getting started. All right, let's say you're a Roman engineer, a grammaticus, as they called them. You've been given a task. Build a road from here to there. No GPS, no drone surveys, no trucks, just a wax tablet, a leather pouch, and a whole lot of ambition. So, how do you begin? Well, the first thing the Romans did, and this says a lot about who they were, was make the road as straight as possible, even if there were hills, forests, marshes, lakes. The Roman solution? Go through it, not around. Their motto might as well have been, shortest path, best path. So the agrimensors, the land surveyors, would head out first. They used long sticks, bronze compasses, and something called a groma, a strange little cross-shaped tool used to align sight lines. They'd mark out a straight line over miles of rough terrain, sometimes climbing trees or lighting signal fires to keep the line going. And once the route was clear, the digging began. Roman roads weren't slapped together. They were layered, crafted with intention, like building a fortress beneath your feet. Let's walk through the layers. Fossa, the ditch. Workers dug a trench about a meter deep. Statumen, big, chunky rocks. These formed the base, heavy and solid. Rudis, crushed stones mixed with lime or sand, kind of like ancient concrete. Nucleus, gravel or compacted earth, smoothed out to support the top layer. Summum dorsum, paving stones. Large, flat stones fitted together like puzzle pieces, all of it designed with slope and drainage in mind. Water ran off to the sides, down into drainage ditches or culverts, which meant, even after centuries, many Roman roads are still here, still walkable. That's not luck, that's engineering. But who built these roads? Here's where it gets a little less heroic, because it wasn't noblemen or senators swinging pickaxes. It was soldiers, slaves, prisoners of war, and the poor. The legions themselves often helped build. Part of their job, especially during peacetime, was to become part engineer, part road crew. They'd clear forests, haul stones, dig trenches, and sometimes they died doing it. The work was brutal, hot, slow, relentless. But the result? A road that could carry 30,000 soldiers across Italy in a week. A road that wouldn't flood, wouldn't collapse, wouldn't fail. A Roman road. Some of them even had curbstones and mile markers. Yes, the Romans invented the mile marker. Called miliarium, they were stone posts placed every 1,000 paces. That's where we get the word mile. Each one told you how far you were from Rome, and sometimes who built that stretch of road, like a stone receipt signed by history. And occasionally, you'd find a rest stop, a kind of ancient highway service station. Small inns called mansiones, where travelers could rest, eat, water their horses. There were also mutationes, places to swap out tired horses for fresh ones. Think of it like Uber for oxen. The road system wasn't just efficient, it was comprehensive, planned, organized, maintained by the state, at least in theory. Some towns were even required by law to contribute workers or materials for road upkeep. It wasn't charity, it was duty, because if the roads failed, so did Rome. So every stone you see today, every half-buried slab or moss-covered path, was placed there with intention, measured, cut, carried, laid down by hand, by people who knew they were building something bigger than themselves, something that would outlive them, and maybe outlive us too. Next time, we'll walk the roads, Explore how they connected the empire, how far they went, and what strange things you might see if you followed one, all the way to the edge. Because a Roman road never just goes from one place to another. It always goes through history. So now we've got our road, a long, straight ribbon of stone stretching across the land, built with sweat, skill, and stubbornness. But what was it like to actually walk along one? Let's imagine it. You're a traveler in the Roman world, somewhere around the year 120 AD. The empire is at its peak, from the misty moors of Britannia to the shining cities of Syria, and in between it all, stone roads. You sling a bag over your shoulder. The sun is just rising. You hear birds, the distant clip-clop of hooves, and the creak of wooden wheels. You're not alone. These roads were busy, not traffic jam busy, but steady, rhythmic, like the pulse of an empire. You might pass a legion on the march, their sandals thudding in perfect unison, or a merchant cart overloaded with wine, olive oil, and amphorae. Maybe a family with children and goats, heading to a festival 2 towns over. And the road itself? It's wide, maybe 4 to 6 meters across, enough for 2 carts to pass, barely. Paving stones underfoot, uneven but solid. Grass and wildflowers line the edges. Now and then, a milestone appears, weathered but still legible. Scene: miles to Capua. If you're lucky, you'll come across a mansio, a government-run stop where couriers and officials could rest, or maybe a mutatio, a horse-changing station. But regular folks, they'd stop at tabernae, roadside inns, basic, dusty, loud. Think straw beds, stew that's mostly beans, and wine that's questionable. Still, after walking all day under the Mediterranean sun, even a cold bowl of lentils tastes like heaven. At night, the road darkens. No streetlights, just the stars, and the occasional oil lamp flickering in a distant farmhouse. Travel wasn't always safe. Bandits were a real thing, especially in lonely stretches. That's why many people traveled in groups. Better company, better protection. But what's truly fascinating is how these roads connected everything. Not just people and places, but ideas. Along these roads came religion, commerce, art, philosophy. A scroll written in Greece could be read in Gaul a few weeks later. A pot made in Spain could end up in a Roman villa in Germany. A soldier from Africa could be stationed in Britain, all thanks to the roads. There were even postmen of a sort. The Roman cursus publicus was like an ancient postal system. Messages carried by dispatch riders moving at full gallop. Governors could communicate. Orders could travel faster than armies. Roads made the empire flexible, resilient, fast, and not just for war. They allowed for trade. Markets could grow. Towns could thrive. Surpluses could move, and shortages could be solved. It wasn't just roads made of stone, it was roads of opportunity. And for the people who lived along them, the road was part of daily life. Imagine a farmer, his land split by the Via Flaminia. Every morning he sees traders pass, soldiers nod their heads. A flute player walks by, humming to herself. The road becomes a stage, and everyone walks across it. For children, the road was a game. For travelers, it was freedom. For thieves, business. For Rome, it was power. But power, as we know, comes with wear and tear. And over time, roads begin to crumble, not all at once, but slowly. One stone slips, then another. Grass grows up through the cracks. Ditches clog, bridges weaken, and the empire that once marched boldly across them starts to slow down. But that's a story for later. For now, Imagine the road beneath your feet, the sun overhead, the sound of sandals, the creak of wagons, the smell of dust and time and warm stone. You keep walking, because the Roman road always leads somewhere. So far, we've walked with travelers, watched merchants roll by, and shared stew with tired feet at a roadside inn. But Roman roads weren't just about movement, they were about meaning. These stones didn't just carry people, they carried culture, language, and something even heavier, belief. Let's start with something small. A word. Take the Latin word via. It just means road. Simple enough, but from that one word, we get others. Viaduct, Via Dolorosa, even the word deviate. The road was always there, and everything else was judged by how far it strayed. The Romans believed in order, straight roads, straight thinking. The road was a metaphor, a symbol. Stay on the path. You're safe. You're Roman. Stray from the road. And who knows what waits in the wilderness? Barbarians, bandits, bad weather, maybe worse. So the road became more than stone. It became ideology. Every conquered city, paved, every new province, mapped and measured. They even had surveying gods, like Terminus, who protected boundary stones. Imagine that, a deity for sidewalks. Roman law followed the roads, Roman religion, Roman coins. In a sense, the more road you had, the more Roman you became. Let's take a step back. Imagine you're a Celtic villager. You live in Gaul. One morning, a crew shows up. Strange language, strange armor. They start digging, laying stones, marking distances. Soon, a Roman road slices through your forest. Your old footpaths disappear. Instead, there's a via, and with it comes everything else. Taxes, soldiers, markets, rules, and, eventually, a bathhouse, a school, a temple. Whether you wanted it or not, Rome had arrived. But it wasn't always forceful. Roads brought opportunity too. A potter in Egypt could now sell wares in Athens. A singer from Syria might perform in Carthage. An ex-legionary could retire in Hispania, open a tavern, and raise sheep. It was a kind of ancient globalization, slow but steady. And with that came stories. Roads became routes of myth and memory. Pilgrims traveled the Via Appia to visit saints' tombs. Philosophers walked the roads debating truth and beauty. Soldiers told tales at campfires, and children played with pebbles carved by generations of wheels. The roads also saw the birth of a new faith. In the dusty edges of Judea, a movement began, and not long after, Christian missionaries walked those very roads, spreading stories, letters, hope. Paul of Tarsus, one of the most influential early Christians, used Roman roads to carry his message, from city to city, through Asia Minor, Greece, and Rome itself, on foot, on wagons, by sandals worn thin. So, the same roads built to control an empire ended up spreading ideas that would eventually reshape it. Funny how that works. Later, emperors would adopt Christianity, build churches, send bishops, repave old roads, but this time they led not just to Rome, but to heaven. And yet, for the average person, the baker, the mason, the shepherd, the road was just part of life. You'd use it to visit family, to trade wool, to sell a pig, to carry a jug of water. You didn't think about it much. It was just there, solid, predictable, safe. In a world full of change, the road stayed the same. But that wouldn't last forever, because as the centuries passed, the roads began to fade, not all at once, but slowly. Abandoned stretches, broken bridges, overgrown milestones, the rhythm of sandals, replaced by silence. Still, even centuries later, somewhere in the countryside, a shepherd might stumble on a smooth stone, half buried, warm in the sun, and maybe, just for a moment, he'd remember the old road, the road of his ancestors, and wonder how far it used to go. Every great road begins with a dream, but what happens when the dream starts to fall apart? By the 4th and 5th centuries AD, the Roman Empire was getting tired. Not dead, but tired. Stretched thin, politically shaky, economically messy, and those stone roads, which once buzzed with soldiers and scribes, started to quiet down. Maintenance was expensive. It took time, money, manpower, and as the empire shifted its focus, those old provincial routes, out on the fringes, they got neglected, overgrown, flooded, cracked. Imagine weeds poking through paving stones, caravans detouring into muddy side paths, bridges left unrepaired after a storm. It didn't happen everywhere all at once, but piece by piece, the empire unraveled, and so did the roads. In the West, things got rough quickly. As Rome lost control of regions like Gaul, Britannia, and Hispania, the once carefully managed infrastructure was abandoned. Roman officials left, tax collectors disappeared, the garrisons fell silent. In their place, local warlords, tribal kings, new powers, and new roads? No, they mostly just took over the old ones, used them when they could, ignored them when they couldn't. But here's the thing, even broken, the Roman roads were still better than anything that came after them. For centuries, travelers in the early Middle Ages would often follow the same paths, even if they were half swallowed by wilderness. You might ride your mule along a forest track, only to spot a mossy milestone with Latin carved into its side. Faded, but still standing. A ghost of empire. The roads became legends in themselves. Pilgrims followed them to holy sites. Monks walked them carrying relics. Traders pushed carts along them, slow and creaky. And sometimes, armies still used them. But the difference? Now, the roads weren't being repaired. They were just surviving, enduring out of habit, not effort. In the East, in the Byzantine Empire, things held together a bit longer. They kept many roads in use, especially around Constantinople. But even there, the golden age of stone engineering was fading. Focus had shifted, priorities changed. Trade routes were forming along rivers. Coastal ports grew more important than inland highways. The road had lost its crown. Still, not everything was lost. Some communities did try to maintain local roads. Village councils filled potholes. Landowners patched broken paving near their estates. Abbeys and monasteries stepped in, especially along pilgrimage routes, because for them, a walkable road meant more pilgrims, and more pilgrims meant more donations. Funny how faith and funding can go hand in hand. By the time we reach the year 1000 AD, most people didn't even realize they were walking on Roman roads. They just called them the Old Way, or the King's Path, or sometimes the Devil's Road. Strange name, huh? Well, when you don't know who built something, and it's stronger than anything you can make, you start to imagine stories. Some said the roads were made by giants. Others said demons laid them in a single night. Truth is, they were just made by regular people, with chisels and carts and calloused hands. People who had a vision and enough stone to make it real. The roads lasted longer than the empire itself, and in a strange way, that was the point. Rome may have faded, but her roads, they carried on, silently, beneath the boots of farmers, the wheels of wagons, the bare feet of children running through dust. And even now, in the quiet hills of Italy or the vineyards of France, you might stumble onto one, a curve of stone half hidden in the grass, leading somewhere. You stop, you look, you wonder, where did it once go? And how many lives passed this very spot? Centuries passed. The world changed. New kingdoms rose, old cities crumbled, languages shifted, maps were redrawn, but under it all, the roads remained. Quiet, patient, waiting. By the late Middle Ages, people began to take notice again. Not just pilgrims and peasants, but scholars, monks, kings. They looked at the broken stones, the strange Latin carvings, the long straight lines that didn't quite match the newer dirt paths. And they asked, who built this? One by one, curious minds began to trace the roads. Early travelers made sketches, wrote notes, mapped where the old stones still ran. In England, they called them Roman ways. In Italy, Via Romana. In France, sometimes just La Vieille Voie, the old way. It was like finding the veins of a forgotten giant. And slowly, the idea returned that these weren't just paths, they were infrastructure, a gift from the past, a system, one that had worked, and maybe could work again. Kings started using old roads to move troops. Merchants realized they could cut days off their journey. Messengers followed them through mountains and valleys. In some regions, the roads were even repaired. Partly, poorly, but still, the effort was there. A flicker of Roman ambition in a post-Roman world. Then came the Crusades. Thousands of men marching from town to town across Europe into the Holy Land. Guess which roads they used? Yep, old Roman ones, worn, battered, but still there. And as they walked, many of them saw ruins, bridges, milestones. Some even prayed beside them. Because by then, the roads had taken on a kind of sacred air. Not just stone and gravel, but memory. Later, in the Renaissance, curiosity turned into obsession. People weren't just using Roman roads, they were studying them, printing books, drawing maps. One Italian engineer even tried to rebuild sections of the Via Appia, 2,000 years after it was first laid. Imagine that, touching the same stones, laying them back in place, like piecing together a sleeping dragon. And it wasn't just nostalgia. The roads worked. In an age before trains, before engines, the Roman model still made sense. Trade increased, travel got faster, ideas flowed. Europe was waking up, and Rome's old skeleton was helping it move again. Then came the Enlightenment, science, measurement, maps that actually looked like the land. Historians began cataloging old Roman roads. Engineers marveled at their precision. Even Napoleon, yes, that Napoleon, ordered surveys of ancient roads across France and Italy. Because for him, a good road meant fast troops, just like the Romans had figured out. And then came railroads, steam, steel, speed. The world transformed almost overnight. But even then, guess where they built the train tracks? That's right, often right along the paths of old Roman roads. Why? Because they were still the most efficient routes, shortest, flattest, smartest. The Romans had already done the hard part. Today, many highways in Europe, and even parts of the Middle East and North Africa, still follow Roman paths. The A1 in Italy, the N7 in France, even parts of the M1 in Britain, all echo the layout of roads built over 2,000 years ago. Let that sink in. You might be driving down a modern motorway, music on, AC blowing, no idea. And beneath your wheels, Roman stones, the past carrying the present. There's something comforting about that the work of hands long gone still guides us, that under all our technology, there's still a road, still stone, still the ancient hum of sandals on gravel. So, next time you walk down a long, quiet path or follow a road that stretches far into the horizon, pause, just for a moment, and listen. Maybe, just maybe, the Romans are still walking there too. So here we are, nearly at the end of our journey. We've walked the stones, traced the paths, met soldiers, merchants, monks, and emperors. But the strange thing is, the road itself never really ends. It just changes shape. In many ways, Roman roads weren't just physical things. They were ideas, a way of thinking about the world, about connection, about how to bring people together, across distance, across time. Think about it. A road starts as a line in the dirt, a trail, a habit. But once you pave it, mark it, measure it, it becomes something more. It becomes a promise. A road says, you can go, you can return, you are not alone. The Romans may not have invented roads, but they understood what roads could become. A road could build an empire, control a province, rescue a city under siege, deliver a message, or a miracle. And long after the soldiers left, the road stayed. Even when the empire collapsed, even when the maps were lost and the languages changed, the roads remained, worn, cracked, but there, waiting. And today, we still walk them, in hiking boots and sneakers, on asphalt and gravel, with GPS, or with no idea where we're going. But the instinct is the same, to follow the road, to find out where it leads. Roman roads remind us of something deeper, that civilizations don't disappear all at once. They echo, in stone, in stories, in the quiet lines that stretch across the land. You see an old road cutting through a forest, and suddenly you're not just in the present anymore. You're in every time at once. The sandals of a soldier, the hooves of a horse, the footsteps of a pilgrim, the wheel of a cart, they all passed this way. And somehow, so did you. There's a quote, you might have heard it, all roads lead to Rome. At first glance, it just means the roads were well designed, that everything connected back to the capital. But maybe it's something more. Maybe it means all journeys, eventually, bring us back to something familiar, to a home, to a memory, to ourselves. Because the Roman road isn't just about movement, it's about return, about creating a world where people can leave and know there's a way back that's powerful, that's timeless. And maybe that's why we still tell stories about them. Not because of the stones, but because of the people who walked them, the lives, the laughter, the arguments, the prayers, the ordinary moments that became extraordinary simply because they were shared on a road that somehow endured. So, next time you're driving on a highway, or walking a quiet path in the countryside, or staring at a Google map that zooms out just far enough, think of the Romans. Think of the surveyors with their strange tools, the engineers with calloused hands, the prisoners laying stone in the summer sun, the merchants and mothers and messengers who made the road come alive. Because the road wasn't just something they built, it was something they believed in, a thread to hold the world together. And in a way, it still does. So here we are, the end of the road, or maybe just another bend. Thanks for walking it with me. Let's meet again, somewhere, down the line.